Hey everyone, this is actually a clip from my new course, Brand New Baby. It's a course for parents in the first 2 months of parenthood where we talk through everything that parents need to know in those first 2 months. Babies don't come with an instruction manual. There's a million baby books. There's a million baby websites that tell you all sorts of different information about baby and that you're doing everything right or doing everything wrong. But what I know is that I can predict pretty well what questions parents are going to ask, whether it be week 2 or week 7 or week 3 or night 1 in the hospital. And so what I've done is I've created a course that goes through week by week and shares with parents what to expect and answers the common questions that they have. The videos are short, they're about 10 minutes each, and there's one for each week so that you know exactly what to do going forward for your baby so that you can connect with your baby, get the rest that you need, and enjoy parenthood more. Check out this video, and if you'd like to learn more, click the link in the description below so that you can join Brand New Baby and get the rest, confidence, and peace that you need for your family. Keep up the good work. Hey everyone, welcome back. Okay, we're at week 7. Things are rolling along. I've got a few more things to talk about, and then I'm just going to let you guys go off to the races and keep putting out other videos and YouTube and podcasts and all those things. But I think parents will quickly see that, as we get further and further out from birth, you see your pediatrician fewer and fewer times, which is great. Because it just shows that, okay, you got this, things are on the right track, things slow down and aren't as serious. And so, we see at the 2 month, we see at the 4 months, 6 month, 9 months, and then 12, and then 15, and then 18, and then 2 years, and then 3 years. And so it just gradually extends out the time between visits. And what you'll see is that in part is because there's a normal variation in things. And if we look at things too frequently, oftentimes it makes us think there's something wrong. Well, your baby's not rolling over yet, or your baby's not sitting up or walking yet. Well, it's because we're seeing you too frequently and asking those questions too often, because there's just a normal variation that you'll see as baby grows and develops. And we'll keep in touch and help each other along, but you'll see that it's less and less mysterious. You'll get into more of a rhythm as things go along. So in this video, there's a couple things that we're going to talk about. First, we're going to talk about vaccines because we're coming up on the 2-month check. We're going to talk about swaddling, and then we're going to talk feeding changes that you'll notice. We'll talk about sleep a little bit too. I'm going to talk more about sleep next week. I actually have a sleep training course that I'll tell you about too, where I kind of walk through with parents how to sleep train. You're not there yet. You don't have to worry about that yet. Just keep feeding your baby to sleep at this point. We'll talk more about that next week though. Now, there's a few things that are typically on parents' minds when it comes to the 2-month visit. You've probably been forewarned or know that at the 2-month visit there's some vaccines that are given. And this is just the normal CDC, American College of Immunization Practices guidelines, is to give some vaccines at the 2-month visit. We know that there are a lot of bad bugs out there in the world, both viruses and bacteria, that we want to protect baby from. And 2-month visit is kind of the time where we're able to start some of those immunizations to help keep baby protected. You also wonder and see lots of misinformation, disinformation, things that make you question, is this the right choice for my baby? Do we need to do something else? So I'm going to try and unpack and demystify that. But if you have questions, drop them below and we can certainly talk through them as we go, or on future videos as well. Now, the first thing that I want you to know is that vaccines help to encourage normal development and keep baby safe. Vaccines help keep baby safe and promote development. Everyone worries about vaccines, and there's so much information and so much discussion out there, and sometimes parents are like, not for my kid. Everyone else can do that, not for me. Now, I will tell you that 200 years ago, parents would have literally, and when I only use literally when I actually mean literally killed for access to the vaccines that we have access to. We, as modern parents, take for granted what vaccines mean, because 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, parents expected that the children that they have would not all reach their first birthday, would not all reach kindergarten or high school graduation, or have their own children. And there was a large number of children that died in the first year of life from fevers, things that we take for granted now and are more of an annoyance because we can't send them to daycare or have their birthday party or something like that. In the past, parents would worry, my baby has a fever, are they going to succumb to some bloodstream infection? My baby has a fever, are they going to have polio and be paralyzed? My baby has a fever. Are they going to stop breathing or cough so excessively that they can't eat and choke? Or all of these really scary things that went along with not having vaccines, being more susceptible to bacterial and viral illnesses. The infant mortality rate was through the roof, and most families lost at least one child to a vaccine preventable disease. And so now it's easy to take that for granted and think, well, a fever, maybe they got an ear infection, but we'll just give them some ibuprofen and keep going with life. But they can't go to daycare, so let's go get it checked out and see if we can get a note to send them to daycare. I mean, there's just, it's easy to take it for granted because we don't know what we're missing. But truly, if you look at the history of civilization, the two things that have moved us forward the fastest and increased the lifespan and longevity and quality of life the most are vaccines and flush toilets, because both of those help to cut down on the number of illnesses that are spread and plagues on society. That was my little rant, and so hopefully that makes sense, and it's not to make you feel bad or anything like that. Most parents have questions, and we talk through those questions and answer them, but at the end of the day, I want you to feel really comfortable with the fact that these vaccines are worthwhile and important, because there are serious bacterial illnesses that even I as a pediatrician have maybe seen once or twice in practice, but my colleagues that are still my partners that work in my clinic that are, were in practice 30 years ago, they saw on a daily, weekly basis, and we're doing lumbar punctures and spinal taps and, well, those are spinal taps, but all sorts of interventions and inpatient antibiotics, and really worried and up all night, and we just don't have those same things, and it's because we have vaccines for some of those bacterial and viral infections that used to be really bad. So at the 2-month visit, you'll get some vaccines for your baby. And I just wanted to talk through really briefly what those are. If you want to learn more about vaccines in general, I have a whole YouTube series on how vaccines work, what the common safety considerations are, what the different vaccines do, all of that stuff I talk through in more detail on my YouTube channel. There's a link below for that if you'd like to check that out. But what we know is that vaccines present an antigen to your baby so that they create their own antibodies to that pathogen, whether it be a virus or a bacteria, so that they get the immune protection from the disease without having to go through the disease. If you get pneumococcal bacteremia, a bloodstream infection with a common bacteria that infects babies in the first year of life, you get sick, you either get antibiotics, you have complications from it, and survive, you get antibiotics and survive, or you don't survive it. But if you survive it with whatever means, you get antibodies to that. So the next time you see it, you don't have to have the same bad experience. Now, that is the natural way to do it, but the complications are high, and the risk of morbidity, meaning like complications that lead to hearing loss or seizures or bloodstream infections or loss of fingers and toes, all of those things, you have to contest against those. So what we know is that giving that vaccine allows your child's own body to make those antibodies to protect them without being exposed to the actual illness. And so that's why vaccines work, and that's how they work in the broad picture of things, is that they make the child's own immune system. So in that sense, it is natural. It's the child's own immune system making their own antibodies to protect them from that bacteria like pneumococcus or Haemophilus influenza, or viruses like polio or measles or mumps or those sorts of things. At the 2-month visit, you get a couple vaccines. Typically, and it varies by practice exactly how it works, but in general, it's 2 pokes and 1 drink. The drink is rotavirus. Rotavirus is a virus that causes gastroenteritis, meaning vomiting and diarrhea. Around the world, it's the #1 cause of death in children because of dehydration. In the US, we're typically able to keep those kids hydrated, but it's a large volume diarrhea, large volume vomiting, and so rotavirus vaccine protects against that and works exceedingly well. That's one that they take by mouth, and it's just a little dropper that the nurse puts in the corner of their cheek, and no trouble. The 2 pokes that they get are pneumococcus, which I've kind of talked about on here. It's a bacteria that causes bloodstream infections, pneumonia, ear infections, infections of the brain, so meningitis. Those are common things that pneumococcus causes. So Prevnar is the bacterial bloodstream infection that causes those. And then Penticell's the way that we have them all put together. Some practices have it a little bit differently, but what is covered is the same. So it has tetanus, so against tetanus bacteria. tetanus, diphtheria, which is a bacteria that can cause severe throat infection and airway complications. Whooping cough, which is a bacteria that causes whooping cough, and it can, especially in young babies, cause them to stop breathing. Apnea, so that's one that we want to protect baby from, and we talked about that in our early episode about having visitors and making sure they have their whooping cough vaccine, because we can't give baby that until they're 2 months old. Hib, which is another bacterial bloodstream infection that causes meningitis infection around the brain. Bloodstream infections, ear infections, pneumonia, those sorts of things. And then polio, which is a virus that causes infection and often paralysis, which can cause lifelong paralysis of different areas of the body depending where the vaccine settles or where the virus settles. So 2 pokes, 1 drink. Those protect against those illnesses. To learn more about the side effects in a nutshell, or in more detail, check out my YouTube channel. But generally, no side effects, no trouble. I almost never hear from parents that they had any difficulty with it. Sometimes there'll be a little bit of soreness or redness around the injection site, which is self-limited and goes away on its own after a day or 2. Sometimes they'll be a little bit sleepier or a little bit fussier in the 12 to 24 hours after the vaccine. And so a dose of Tylenol after the vaccine, if they're fussy, is totally fine. You don't have to treat with Tylenol or anything like that. You can just wait and see, okay, they're fussy, let's give them some Tylenol. Occasionally they'll get a fever. Usually it's like a low-grade fever, so 100, 101, something like that. And again, if they are fussy and have a fever, give them Tylenol and just keep an eye on things. It goes away quickly, usually within 12 to 24 hours, and they're back to their normal selves, much better than any of the infections that they stand to be at risk for if you don't get those vaccines. So I reassure parents that the vaccines are one of the best studied interventions in all of medicine. And so I feel very comfortable with those vaccines and the vaccine schedule. Now, parents often wonder, is that too many vaccines in one dose? Which I completely understand because it sounds like a lot. Well, we don't want to wait on protecting baby to just spread things out unnecessarily. So it's been closely studied and shown that it's completely fine to give that many vaccines at a time. And if you think about the immune system as a whole, the immune system, you and I, baby, are exposed to a lot more antigens every single day than is in any of those vaccines. Our immune systems handle all sorts of dust particles, viruses, bacteria, funguses in the air and in the carpet and the things that we breathe in and the things that baby puts in their mouth. They're exposed to a large number more antigens than that. And so I have no concerns about it being too many vaccines at a given time. You get the same vaccines at 2, 4, and 6 months. And those are the only vaccines that you get in that period of time. So you get accustomed to that. And babies are usually totally fine. Sometimes they sleep a little bit more, sometimes a little bit fussier. Otherwise, no problems. Hopefully that makes sense. If you want more information, check out my YouTube channel. Otherwise, if you have questions, talk with your doctor about it. But that's kind of just a heads up about what's to come at that visit. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is when to stop swaddling baby, because most parents have realized the benefit of swaddling, and they're really anxious and worried about when we have to stop swaddling because swaddlings work so well. Their baby sleeps like a charm, or at least better than when not swaddled, and you don't want to give it up. And I reassure parents that you can keep swaddling baby until baby starts to roll. When baby starts to roll or is really close to rolling or has rolled over, it's time to quit the swaddle. The reason for that is because when baby rolls over, I want her to have her arms about her so that she can move herself. She can push down and move her head if she needs to, just for airway protection and everything like that. Most babies can't roll over when they're actually swaddled because it's kind of hard, like when you're a straight jacket, to roll yourself over. It's amazing the way that babies learn to roll over because it just seems like, well, anybody can roll over. But then when you watch your baby do it and they're like stuck with one arm in the air and they can't move the other arm, it's crazy to think that they learn the ability and then all of a sudden all they do is roll over all the time. So once baby can roll over, it's the time to stop swaddling. Until that time, it's fine to continue swaddling, especially at bedtime. And parents often wonder, well, what do we do because they stopped swaddling and now baby's going to sleep terrible? The good thing is that by the time they are rolling over, they're usually leaving that 4th trimester, the 3 months after birth. And so they're accustomed to sleeping without being swaddled up. And most just go to PJs and do totally fine. There's all sorts of special sleep sacks and things like that that you can certainly look into. It's not a big deal if you want to try one of those. But I think, and we, we've had 5 kids and we've been huge swaddling proponents and always like, oh, we don't want to give up the swaddle. Babies always do fine. It's not as big of a deal as we ever make it out to be. They sleep fine after we get them out of the swaddle. They're fine and just in regular jammies, nothing else in the crib. They don't need blankets or anything like that. Perfectly fine to just continue on without swaddling then. And that brings me to my next point too, which is, at some point you're going to say, well, when can we move baby into their own room? And I think most parents feel comfortable sometime in the first 6 months of life, and that's totally fine. I think a lot of parents want baby close by for comfort, for nursing ease, and those sorts of things. So keep your baby in your room as long as you like, but feel comfortable with that, especially if they're in a flat sleeping surface, if they have nothing else in the crib, if they're alone, and that's totally fine. So we can get into more detail, or check my YouTube channel because I talk a lot about it there. I also talk about that in my Mighty Sleepers course for parents that want to work on getting better sleep for their baby. We talk through all of that as well. If that makes sense, and if that gives you peace of mind about the swaddling, hit the like button below, or comment below, I guess I should say, because it's helpful for me to know, yes, that makes sense, and gives me a little bit of peace of mind. So an emoji or a yes below in the comments so that I know that I'm on the right track. Now, the third thing that I wanted to talk about briefly is feeding. Parents want to know, is this how feeding is going to go? What's going to change the next few months? So in the next few months, what you'll see with feeding is that babies take larger volumes and space out their feedings. Now, the nice thing about that is you can feed them a little less frequently. They'll also be awake more, so you can have more time between feeding and sleeping and changing their diaper, or you can actually see baby, put baby on the ground, watch baby interact with the environment and all those sorts of things. Oftentimes parents will notice accelerations in their growth where all of a sudden their onesies aren't fitting as well, and they're taking these huge volumes of feeding, either feeding frequently at breast or taking more bottles and everything like that. And then they'll go through periods of time where they don't grow as much. Both are totally normal, and you'll see over the span of the first year of life, periods of accelerated growth and accelerated calorie consumption, and then periods where they don't take as much. And that's totally normal and expected. I expect that as babies get older, they can also take more and more calories during the daytime. So 3 to 4 month old babies can probably take at least 75% of their feedings during daylight hours, which means 1 or 2 feedings overnight. By 4 to 6 months of age, we're talking 90%, which equates with 1 or 2 nighttime feedings. And then by 6 months of age, the vast majority of babies can take 1 or no overnight feedings and get all their calories condensed into the daytime, which is just amazing for parents because then they can get better rest. So one thing that I thought of as we were talking about rest and swaddling is when babies start to roll over, what do I do? Because he's constantly rolling over and I want him safe sleep, back to sleep, everything like that. But what am I supposed to do? Stand by his crib all night and watch him? Once babies can roll over on their own and they're in a flat sleeping surface with no other pillows, blankets, stuffies, or anything like that, once he rolls over, you can just leave him. I always think it's best practice to just put baby down flat on their back, and then if he rolls over and goes to sleep on his tummy, babies do love to sleep on their tummies, and oftentimes you'll see them stick their butts in the air when they sleep, then that's totally fine once he can do it on his own. So just let him do that on his own. You don't have to flip him over. You don't have to try and, put a piece of duct tape across his stomach or something onto the crib to hold him down. You don't have to do any sort of special pillows or things to try and keep him. Those are not necessary. All it does is add to anxiety and introduces new things into the crib. When they roll over on their own to sleep on their tummy, just let them do that and worry not. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that answers some of your questions. Now, if you want more information, the things that we talked about, so about vaccines, there's 2 good websites I like, and they'll be in the links below too. Immunize.org has a lot of information about vaccines. It's not there's no financial interest in them providing the information, so you don't have to worry that it's coming from the vaccine manufacturers or anything like that. And the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia Vaccine Education Center. Those are the 2 places that I send parents that want to know a little bit more about vaccines as they get ready to give them. It's great resources and super helpful, and it just breaks it down and tells you what the vaccines are, what they protect against, what to watch for, answers all the questions that parents typically have. Secondly, watch for rolling. If baby starts to roll over, you got to abandon that swaddle. That doesn't mean that sleep is going to go off the rails. Try not to worry about that. And then realize that those bigger feedings allow for more spacing, and you can try and get more calories fit into daylight hours so that at night, 1 or 2 feedings, hopefully soon, and then by 6 months of age, 0 or 1 overnight feeding so that you can get the rest that you need. And if you want, check out my Mighty Sleepers course. I'll talk about it a little more in the next video, but it's about that time where parents start to wonder, when can we sleep train? Not quite yet, but you can learn everything that you need to know, so when the time comes, you're ready. And that's a course that I put together, which is called Mighty Sleepers, and it's just like this. It's just the exact same sort of information, very informational and comforting tone. and I've talked with enough parents that I know the typical questions and the typical hangups. So if that's something that you want to look into, click the link below. There's a little discount button below too, so that you don't have to pay full price for it, because I want you to get that information, and you're already primed because you know me, and we've had these weeks together to kind of know my style and everything like that. So I know that you're the type that wants to prepare in advance, and so that's why I want to give you that special discount if you join Mighty Sleepers. So comment yes if that's helpful. We got one more video, and we'll be at the 8 weeks, and we'll talk at the next video about how to encourage longer stretches of sleep, what developmental changes can you expect in the next few months, and then where to go from here. Keep up the good work, and I'll see you in the next video.